The solution stack, the horror to every CISO.
So the question is, how much can you consolidate? What's a realistic amount?
5 different products are all alerting on the same event. And so that's not defense in depth, that's noise in depth. And nobody wants to admit it. This may get me cancelled. I may lose my job for this. Vendors don't want you to consolidate. They want you to consolidate into their solution stack.
What we've got, which is a billion different tools that fix a billion different problems, but none of them work together because they don't want to.
No one's going to build something that enables other people to make money off of your back.
If your product doesn't integrate openly and play well across diverse environments, you're already behind. Even if AI could unify the stack, do we, leaders of business, really trust handing over that much control to a single platform?
5 years ago, we would have not released this kind of crap into production. It's the goddamn truth. Whatever happened to Symantec, right? What the hell happened to McAfee over the years? All of these kind of companies that just enshittified over the years, and people de-enshittified their security stack.
Let's just rinse customers for everything they can get, rather than, God forbid, you do a good job. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Razorwire. Now, today, I have brought back Oliver and Richard to discuss all things around the solution stack. How we consolidate it. Should it be consolidated? What does the market think about consolidation of the solution stack? What do we advise vendors? What's the CISO position? What's the futurist position? This is why we bring these people, aka Oliver and Richard, into these discussions to gather their wisdom and to see whether or not we can come up with something really good. So without further ado, and today, to sit and discuss with us about consolidating the solution stack, I have 2 people who are now completely consolidated in the fact that they're co-hosts, because we do this kind of content all the time. The illustrious Oliver and Richard. Do you want to introduce yourself? Everybody has seen you. I mean, Richard has got the second best short on the actual channel, so they know who you both are. So, but go for it. I'll let Oliver go first, since Richard's got the second best short on the channel.
So, no, yeah, I mean, Oliver Rochford, former industry analyst, worked for Gartner, did SIM Magic Quadrant, codenamed the SOAR space, and currently working in my own advisory company. So I advise multiple vendors, including a company called Agoria, which is relevant to the topic today. But I think the bigger plug is I just released a free report on cyberfuturist.com for security telemetry pipelines. It's got a market overview, representative vendor, no landing page, no sign up, nothing. You can just download it. It's for free. And and I've also just, if you're a European vendor doing CTEM, hit me up. My European advisory is going to do a market report coming up.
Fantastic. Check that out. Definitely. I read pretty much everything Oliver releases. It's fantastic, and I can firmly recommend it. Come on then, Richard.
Richard Cassidy, a EMEA CISO at a vendor called Rubrik. So all about cyber resilience, and now moving into the data security and AI space, which is cool. And it's going to make for a very interesting conversation, because the side of the fence I sit on, is part of the very problem we're going to be talking about in this podcast today. So yeah, good to be back.
Fantastic. So the solution stack, the horror to every CISO, the wonder of how much it's going to cost you to layer your products, to look at how everything works, how it's all going to fit in with your defense in depth, your iceberg, however you want to call it, your security onion. It's always been a bit of an issue, and it's only gotten harder in the last 10, 15 years by the amount of vendors and tools and things that you can get now. And with budgets always being significantly more difficult for a CISO to manage, because we don't really get anything. We get £5, a pickled egg, and a promise on the back of a handkerchief that, you can have more if you absolutely need it, or we have a serious security event and it scares the out of us that we go and actually spend more. What are your thoughts on the history of that defense in depth? Who wants to go first?
First point is too many tools solving the same problem. I think we're there. We've been there for a while, in my opinion. And I can say that having sat similar to Oliver in some of his career on the vendor side of the fence. And I've been one of the people that have been at fault for selling the dream that fast became a deployment and, productized nightmare. But that's the point, right? Too many tools. And here's the reality. Most enterprises are running, 50 plus, and that's probably lowballing it, security tools. And then you got to ask why then, right? Because 5 different products are all alerting on the same event, whether it's ransomware, cybersecurity. And so that's not defense in depth, right? I've been speaking to CISOs, and we feel that that's noise in depth, and nobody wants to admit it. And so instead of making us better, safer, more capable, I believe what we're seeing is teams getting burnt out, costs being driven up, and we are being left guessing which alert is the one to trust, because every vendor says theirs is the one, and we run multiple layers of machine learning, and now we have AI, and we're so much better at this. But at some point, you've got to ask, are we securing the business? And I mean, ask the buyer, or are we just collecting logos? And I would say that's where the industry has found itself. And I think that's probably a killer point to start on. And I'd love to hear what Oliver has to say.
I think you're spot on. I mean, as an industry analyst, what you observe is that actually there are these cycles. And if you imagine, so the way I describe this is as follows. You have a CISO who says that, okay, I've got too many tools. I'm going to push for platform consolidation. And a whole bunch of vendors, the entire market jumps to basically offer it. And that guy will basically be a thought leader, and a whole bunch of people follow. 3 years later, after the market is there, at that point, people start realizing that early adopter actually, okay, there's a problem with the consolidated platform approach. It actually doesn't deliver what's on the tin, because a portfolio is not a platform. And that vendor can't be an expert in SAP, Microsoft, Oracle, and everything else. It's as unrealistic for them as it is for you, what the vendor's offering you, because I don't think we get everything from one vendor. Security, I don't think is much of an exception, but the need is real. It's understandable. The problem is we have a 6-year cycle where then, you can imagine you have a 3-year contract. So the last people jump on, and 3 years later, we've gone the other way, because there's always this seesaw effect of trying to balance the perfect combination there. What's the driver for this tool sprawl? The attack surface and threat development. So even if we can consolidate once, you will always have this trend where it starts sprawling out again, and you're going to have to pull it back because you're adapting your tool base, and the vendor, it's not that they don't want to adapt. They have various things pulling against them that makes it hard to adapt. Most of all, their biggest customers where they're making money, and they also specialize. So the question is, how much can you consolidate? What's a realistic amount? And what's a good strategy? Because certain combinations have synergies. I mean, I can go back. There was a company several years back. We tried to combine vulnerability management with privileged access management. Crazy. 2 different buyers, synergies only on paper. And of course, that's not a good consolidation. But there are other consolidations which work actually incredibly well. If you have endpoint and identity data, they're complementary, right? Endpoint network data complementary. So the question is, how do you do this in a good manner? How do you balance cost versus complexity versus efficiency?
I guess in many respects, a large chunk of what we're experiencing at the moment with this vast plethora of tools, and it is starting to happen now. We've had other discussions about this. You're seeing big conglomerates coming along and hoovering up all kinds of different technology. I mean, you used to have it back in the day with Symantec and what was it? Security Associates, who would hoover up any firewall technology, endpoint technology, and kind of add it or basically run it down in favor of their own internal tools. There's I'm not going to mention anybody, but there's one particular big vendor who now owns about 8 different vendors, and it's like, okay, that's lovely, but there's no synergy between any of this technology, and I still have 55 different dashboards to go in and actually read what's going on. And one of the big problems I also have is, and you mentioned it before, is getting that balance, because you don't want to put all of your kind of like security eggs in one particular basket. I hear a lot of people nowadays say, oh, Microsoft provides endpoint security and this and that and the other. And you look at it and I'll be honest, I mean, no, I use the Microsoft suite for the OS, the endpoint, the services. I don't use it for security. I'll be honest. I'd prefer to use other tools for that, better tools that have been built solely for that. But as you say, you get too many tools, you've got too many areas you've got to keep an eye on, and it becomes an absolute nightmare. And then you get the people who come along with their single pane of glass. Let's see who winces at that one. Richard, I thought, Richard, you were having a stroke there. I mean...
Yes.
Yeah. Another single pane of glass, you say?
Another one.
Oh, yes. It's triple glazing, guys. Come on, it's good. It's good. You got this.
But this is it. And I think, I mean, we've already mentioned the buzzword of AI. I think it's probably the only way I think we're going to actually be able to handle the amount of tools that we seem to have at this moment in time, by way of the fact that it handles all of the tools and you just kind of deal with the AI, you deal with that aspects to kind of tell you what's going on around the environment. Because Richard, you've done this, haven't you, where like you have a security event and you decide to go back to the scene logs, and oh my god, 6 days later you're still looking at scene logs and trying to figure out exactly what the bloody hell's going on from like multiple tools. And as you say, they've all got multiple ways of reporting to you as well, so you've got to be able to understand it all, and no one person can understand every single tool out there on the market, let alone in a large organization where you have multiple sort of stacks of sometimes very similar technology. But I do think that the market is changing that. I think we've had discussions before, Richard, about DORA and NIS2 coming in, and the fact that the requirements around it are going to dramatically change that solution stack and the way it looks. And I think we're going to be going through quite a significant change in the way that we look at our solution stack. That was very long-winded, but it'd be good to get your thoughts.
Well, look, I'd love to comment on that, and even the AI piece. And I know I've been seen as an AI futurist and all these things, but I'm becoming a little bit more of a realist recently. But let's start with this, and this may get me cancelled. I may lose my job for this, but it is a truthful statement, and we're here to be transparent. Vendors are not incentivized to reduce, they're incentivized to add. And so let's be honest, vendors don't want you to consolidate. They want you to consolidate into their solution stack. That's why every platform today is, as I call it, a Frankenstein of acquisitions, right? Half integrated, with 6+ million different UIs of these different panes of glasses, patchwork of APIs, webhooks, and yet the vendors sell it as seamless, and present company not included for obvious reasons. But why is no one building platforms that are designed to retire products? This is what I've been trying to say, and I'm not just bundle more in, because really, ultimately, growth is about adding, not subtracting. In the eyes of the vendors, so this is what's killing customers who are just begging for really what is simplicity. And then the AI bit, we all thought or think AI is going to solve the consolidation problem, but the dream is that AI becomes this magic layer, and Microsoft started this, I would say, really with Copilot, that stitches all of these fragmented, overlapping tools together. And instead of us having to manually correlate, as you said, James, signals across multiple, log inputs and dashboards, AI should do the heavy lifting, dedupes the noise, prioritizes the real alerts, because it's not just threats, it's also operational alerts. And suddenly, boom, the stack shouldn't feel so messy. But here's the reality. Here's the AI realist side now. AI doesn't consolidate your tools, in my experience. It consolidates the pain of your stack.
Yeah.
It smooths out the chaos, right? But it doesn't reduce the sprawl. You're still paying for all of these tools. You're still wrangling around API configurations, integrations. You're still managing licenses. You're still dealing with who knows how many different vendors and third parties. So AI might help you survive the sprawl, but it doesn't eliminate the sprawl. And what's worse, having been out on a lot of AI roadshows now recently, is most of the AI that the vendors are pushing right now is just being baked into individual products. So now instead of one noisy tool, you have one noisy tool with AI, and so does the next one, and then the next one, and now you've got 30 competing AI co-pilots, not Microsoft's co-pilot, but just co-pilots, all shouting over each other. And now we've just shifted from alert fatigue to AI fatigue. So well done, pat yourself on the back, buying AI. So anyway, I'm sure Oliver thought I would never say something like that, but here we are.
Well, one quick thing.
I knew you'd come around eventually.
Well, one quick thing before Oliver tells us how it's all there. The other thing to remember is, if you are reliant on something to do a lot of the management of these tools for you, it's very easy to forget you've got the bloody tools. So you end up kind of like paying for something that nothing ever gets used. You know, I mean, the amount of times I've walked in and IDS, IPS is still in learning mode. It's not even doing what it's meant to be doing, and they've had it for 5 years. And I think AI, you're just going to forget what you've got in the stack, you know, because you're not going to see it. It's just going to be a bill that hits finance, and finance go, oh, do we still need this? And you're going to be like, oh, I don't know, actually. Let's renew it for another year, and I'll look at it in the year, and of course then it gets lost again. But anyway, sorry, Oliver.
I just want to say, because you raised another good point there. Let's just assume, let's be AI futurists and sensationalists. Let's say AI can unify the stack. Like that's the view. Listen, there's a lot of distrust in AI at C-level at the moment, and it's not getting any better. But even if AI could unify the stack, do we, leaders of business, really trust handing over that much control to a single platform? Because you've got the simple questions: who's tuning it? Who's watching for gaps, for bias, for false positives, and all the near misses? So the risk is that we start believing that AI has it covered, and a lot of the vendors pushing AI are trying to sell that message, but the underlying system still remains as brittle and untrustworthy as ever. So there you go. I just thought I'd add that in.
Go on then, Oliver.
Yeah, I'm just going to extend on what you guys said. I mean, you're right. But the arithmetic for vendors is that the more of your security budget they can claim, the cheaper the total cost of customers. That's the basic arithmetic. What a vendor calls stickiness, a user calls vendor lock-in. That's a simple balance right there. And advising startups, yeah, we plan for stickiness. Of course we do. No one's going to build something that enables other people to make money off of your back. You even economically do that. But the truth is that it's time to use an end user to push back. Start insisting that they support standards in RFPs. Push from the bottom. Make things mandatory, being able to get your data out and so on. You have a lot more power than you actually understand. That's how most things come about, without people agreeing on it, just by the RFP starting to sing. So there's some push you can do there. And as for the portfolio offerings from the vendors, you know the spork, right? It's a terrible implement. A spork is like a spoon and a fork. It's what you normally get in a mess kit when you're in the military. It's a terrible spoon. It's a terrible fork. That's what you basically get in a lot of cases when you look at these basically consolidated solutions. But is it possible? Now, I don't often say something nice about Wiz. However, the reason why they took off is because they came in and were able to displace 3 other solutions out of the get-go. CMDB, so Cloud Security Posture Management, they designed it because they knew if I can go to a CISO and say, you can get rid of 3 other solutions, they will buy. We need more vendors to think like that. Maybe not act like that, but to think like that, right? And so I think that's a good way of basically looking at this. The fact that there is something that, and the vendors should pick better synergies, because a really large corporation, they buy startups because they're trying to basically short market share, and they're trying to get the most amount out of the least amount of customers. That's completely natural, but there are other mid-sized vendors or slightly smarter vendors who do synergize their portfolio, because if you think it's painful for you to manage, it's painful for them to build. And that's the other thing. Even you have a certain amount of teams within a vendor, they don't communicate, they can't agree on standards unless you're enforcing it. You're better off having an external standard than expecting 3 of your groups to come up with one. And so the complexity isn't just on the user side, is I guess what I'm saying. There has to be like a balance between the two again. But most of all in AI is not going in the short term to mid-term to fix any of these problems. It will actually exacerbate them, because right now it's an experimental phase. Half of the stuff isn't. 5 years ago, we would have not released this kind of crap into production. It's the goddamn truth. The reason why we're doing it is because we've spent so much money on this that we somehow have to try to recoup the losses, and nobody else has any other ideas. They just have to keep rebuilding better sims. I said it, that's the way it is. And so at the same time, is it really going to help you? No, adoption has been lackluster. Investment is going back. Goldman Sachs just released a report saying there's no productivity gains visible in the GDP. Microsoft have pedaled back investments in data centers. This is not going to be like that. This is evolution. If you're waiting for the breakthrough, we just had it 2 years ago.
I was sat with a group of CISOs in the Nordics only early this week over dinner from banks, and I asked them, so what are your AI projects? What are you trying to achieve? And honestly, none of them had an answer. And what was even worse was there was a CISO on the following day, the large company, I can't mention them, who said, well, the board tells us we have to adopt AI. We have to find ways to implement AI. That just makes me sad because you're clearly buying into the hype you've heard from the vendors that are selling you this AI dream, and actually you're not thinking about how feasible and how trustworthy it is. So you're absolutely right. It isn't going to solve the problems in the medium to short term, and and you have to know why and where AI, and maybe chatbots and customer services use cases are a good idea, but that doesn't come without risks. But security, we're not there yet.
It's hard work to be done for integration. The truth is that if we want to have better integrated, because we talk about consolidated, maybe we need to talk about integrated. And for that, as an industry, we still need to align better on standards. It's happening. There are less standards today for data than before. The majority of SIM vendors now have the majority of security analytics vendors have some kind of data lake on the back end. They're increasingly moving to things like Iceberg on S3, so there's standardization going there. It's not enough yet on an application layer, because this is all on the back end. It's being driven by cloud and data engineering. On a security layer, I think we're not quite there yet, but that's what you require. And yes, we have to be better at exchanging data. That's the other thing, right? That's what's going to enable this. But without these mechanisms, you're expecting a vendor to try to build this from scratch. And I don't think any vendor can.
But, and interestingly, what brought about this particular topic was a conversation we had at the end of a previous podcast around an IDC report that said, in the top three and it was consistent in 23 and 24, that CISOs, well, in this case, it was CIOs, were heavily focused on consolidating the solution stack. They were looking to consolidate vendors' capabilities. And then you think, well, why is that? And then the conversations I'm having is, well, we want to reduce cost and complexity, but I wouldn't mind tackling the cost fallacy of consolidation. Everybody talks about consolidation as a cost-saving move, but actually, when you dig in, those promised 40, 50, 30% savings never materialize. And to Oliver's point, what Wiz are doing, and also, Rubrik are doing the same, you don't sell consolidation just because you should do it because it'll save cost. You've got to show the tools that you can actively remove, the licenses you can save. And that's really what consolidation is about. It's about reducing the spread and sprawl of these tools and getting the same, hopefully the same, but certainly a better level of outcome. But, these costs never materialize, right? And why? It's because what we tend to forget about is the migration costs, the retraining, the integration projects that never seem to end. I'm not talking all vendors, right? But please, for any second, don't think this is a broad stroke brush across all vendors. We want to cut tool spend, but does that crank up the costs of people and then leads to burnout? So, we have to assess more than just the technology consolidation question, the license consolidation. What's the collateral damage to the organization, and are we just moving expense from the tech column or the technical column to the human one? And I think CISOs have to think about that part of consolidation than just the sale from the vendor.
All I'll say is it was a lot bloody easier 10 years ago when we had quite a few less solutions to worry about. I mean, I remember when email security first came out. Oh my God, and we all sort of went and had a look at what that was about. And we had like 5 different things that we needed: a firewall, endpoint security, or AV as we used to call it, a bit of email security, and if you were really paranoid, a bit of internet security. Because let's face it, back then it was a bit of a wild west on what people were doing with the internet. Nowadays it's a smorgasbord of God knows what. I mean, I'm in this space and I still get surprised, as me and Oliver have spoken about. what's this new wonderful acronym about? I don't know. What is it? I don't know. I heard it from a marketing person, some vendor I spoke to yesterday, and I still don't even know what he's talking about. Jumping on fads as well. It's like we saw it with GDPR. All the vendors were coming in. It didn't matter what you were selling. It was something to do with protecting you from GDPR risk. We've had it a fair bit with DORA and a fair bit with NIS2, but now we've got all kinds of tools that do all kinds of things. I mean, we've got ransomware protection. We've got, oh God, I don't even know where to begin anymore. I'll be honest. Well, I do, but the thought of having to go out and procure like 15 new tools just to secure the new customer coming in and having to explain why they need each and every single one of them. We do need some consolidation. We had this massive explosion of tools when cybersecurity suddenly became a big thing. It was a big thing for a long time, but nobody cared. And 10 years ago, suddenly people cared. And of course, we had lots of people coming into the market. And now we've got what we've got, which is a billion different tools that fix a billion different problems, but none of them work together because they don't want to. I know at least one GRC vendor, I'm not going to say who it is, who have just jacked their prices up by 200%. 200% on renewals. I know people who've been using their products for 3 years and are now, and it's something that I can't remember which one of you mentioned it actually, around getting your data out, being able to migrate to new products. And it's not in their best interest to let you do that. So they just wait to your renewal time and then jack the prices up. Of course, this is an American company, and I love American companies and I love Americans. Please don't stop watching the channel because you're quite a big demographic for us. But American companies seem to be very, very good at doing that. So what are your thoughts on the future? How's this going to go both from a business angle and from a user angle? I mean, actually, let's do it this way. Richard, you tell us from the from the CISO angle.
Yeah, thinking about this as a CISO now, and in my opinion, what if it's the stack itself that's broken? Right. And what I mean by that is, it's an uncomfortable question to have to ask yourself as somebody that makes purchasing decisions on technology and solutions. But what if consolidation isn't the answer? Because the stack itself is the problem. We've almost built this. I don't know if you know the cartoonist Rube Goldberg, the old American cartoonist. Yeah, this Rube Goldberg machine of overlapping tools feeding overlapping data, and we still get breached, right? So maybe the issue isn't how many tools we have. Maybe it's that we've accepted as industry complexity as an inevitability when actually it's the enemy. And if we don't question the whole architecture, I think we're just polishing the same broken model. And the other side of this that I have to call out in my experience is, are systems integrators and resellers incentivized to solve the problem or sustain it? And look, here's the uncomfortable truth. And I hope I don't get cancer from half the partnerships I've built over the years, but no one really likes to say it out loud, right? Most security solution sales they don't end with the vendor. They go through a complex web of systems integrators, resellers, and partners. And these folk don't make money when things get simpler. They just don't. They make money when they can sell, integrate, customize, and support complexity. So, on the surface, everyone loves to talk about consolidation. But for the partners who thrive on service hours, custom engineering, support contracts, consolidation is a direct threat to revenue. So, fewer tools means fewer billable hours and fewer integration projects and less duct tape needed for this Rube Goldberg machine. So, I think, we have to stop pretending that there's not a structural tension here in the marketplace. The incentives are skewed, and we need, as customers, consumers, to really be holding your feet to the fire and trying to eliminate that complexity. I'm not saying don't trust the partners, system integrators. Please, they're there hopefully to help guide you, but understand their revenue model and ask the tough questions. So, I think that was worth mentioning. And from the user side, that's what my biggest problems are. I think the stack is becoming the problem with complexity. And I don't believe partnership ecosystem is stacked in favor of consolidation. In fact, we know it just isn't.
And you make a very good point before I hand over to Oliver. Integrators are terrible at this kind of thing. They tie you in with products you don't even need. The amount of the large integrators that I've come across in my career is pretty much all of them. And I don't like any of them. I'm sorry, guys, I don't. I think that you make things way more complex than they need to be. And, in essence, what you're trying to do is sell more to facilitate the shareholders and your bosses. than actually doing what you should be doing, which is appropriately securing the environment from the threats and that they have to their assets. That's the important thing here. That's what breeds a customer that stays with you. And this is how I built Razorthorn and its principles around our consultancy. We don't sell stuff to people who don't need it. If they want it, they can still have it. I'm not going to say no to people. At the end of the day, if that's what they want, that's what they want. It's a question of whether it is what they need. And I think there's a big problem in this industry with people who've come in thinking, let's just rinse customers for everything they can get, rather than, God forbid, you do a good job. Anyway, that's just my very small point, and I'll hand over to Oliver.
No, I'm completely with you. I think there's as an industry we are incentivized in many ways wrongly. But 2010, I had the majority of the world's security solutions in my head. By 2016, I couldn't. Gardner, I wrote a blog called Cambrian Explosion of Cybersecurity 2016. I reposted on LinkedIn last year because I started a series. You can get it for free. Go onto my profile, called Busting the Myth of the Market Consolidation. Because in reality, it's consolidating in some markets. Overall, it's actually gotten bigger and more complex. And that's what we're struggling with. Richard says we need new ways. That's what you're seeing. This is experimentation to try to find new ways of doing it, because that old one-size-fits-all approach only doesn't work when you start expanding security across the entire world. Security is not a vertical, it's a horizontal that serves every other vertical. There is financial companies who need security, manufacturing companies, aviation companies, government. You cannot service all of these. And so that's part of what you're seeing. And my favorite, where I work is security operations. And we're seeing this proliferation of different models, including security data lakes, XDR, SIM. We're seeing telemetry pipelines to tie it all together. And really, this is people trying to find better ways. The problem for most users in the meantime is confusion, because they can't find what they're looking for, because most vendors aren't very disciplined about their ICP. They're opportunistic. They will try to pretend that their solution can do everything, when in reality, they actually have quite a niche target in most cases. Getting better at identifying is a short-term solution, but the hope is that in the long term, that this experimentation phase, like the Cambrian explosion, the majority of experiments died. They weren't viable in the long term, and we see that all the time in our market. But we're starting to get, I would say, a couple of stable operating models, things which are starting to get traction across more organizations. Some of them are cloud-centric, some network, some identity-centric, depends on really where your center of gravity there is. A manufacturing company is very network-based. They're going to have, segmentation, zero trust. Like as insurance is a personnel company, they're going to be very distributed with lots of people. You're going to need a different architecture and set of tools to do that. We're just not very good at identifying these, and reading people's websites and collateral. People are terrible at describing their stuff. It's wishy-washy. It's not technical anymore. It's aspirational writing. It's what they're selling. It's B2C crap, not B2B stuff, And that doesn't help the fact that vendors make it opaque what they're actually selling.
The users are also victims of their own requests. So let's talk about the vendor mega platform wars. I'm not going to mention them because it's unfair, but right now the biggest players are all racing to be the unified security platform, as they call them, or the unified data security platform, whatever the angle is they're using. And they're promising these one-stop shops for detection, response, identity, cloud data, list goes on, you name it. But ask yourself, are these really integrated platforms, or they're just kind of these sprawling empires under a single logo? But here's the point. We asked for that. Users asked for this. We're complaining about tool sprawl, but we wanted consolidation in the sense of a big vendor. So, aren't we part of the problem? Shouldn't we be embracing these very platforms, or this era of platforms, and stop nitpicking about it? Because, maybe good enough under one roof, I guess, beats best of breed chaos.
The truth is that, coming back to no one size fits all, if you're struggling to keep the lights on, you don't build a data lake. And this whole pushing down security strategy from FANG companies or the top tech companies, it's a terrible idea. That stuff doesn't translate to average companies, where my experience having done firewall support, having done like some of the stuff at Gartner, it's like you have a company, they have 3 to 5 people, they are managing 20 solutions. Their day consists of firewall changes and password changes. And every so often there's a red alert because the SIM says something bad. That's the lived reality of many people in security. Not, I'm in my 24 people SOC and, we're doing detection engineering. We need to stop pushing that down. And the consolidated platform is for the people who need convenience, simplification, not just on a technology level, even buying it and managing the licenses. And they do provide that. Problem is that in the long term, they stop providing it. And shitification is also real in security. And shitification, if you're not familiar with it, Cory Doctorow came up with the term that as a SaaS service gets older, they start getting crappier and crappier because they start giving it for free. Then they start monetizing the users, and then they start monetizing enterprises. And at the end of it, it's basically a pile of crap. And we see that in security a lot. I don't want to mention, we can mention name, whatever happened to Symantec, right? What the hell happened to McAfee over the years? All of these kind of companies that just enshittified over the years, and people de-enshittified their security stack. Yeah.
Look, I came from that era myself, and it was. I mean, they were the ones that would buy. They would just buy everything. They expanded through acquisition, and it wasn't always good acquisition. It was to just get somebody off the market who was in their way. They were the early ones who had all the money, literally all of the security money. Now, yeah, you're right. I don't know where they are. I think Symantec's still around somewhere, but I don't know anyone that uses them anymore. I'm sorry if you're a Symantec customer out there. So what would you say to vendors, up and coming sort of like software companies looking to provide solutions into this space? I mean, I get contacted by a lot of people who are just sort of, can you please sell my product, blah, 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 we're new, we're game changers, blah, blah, all the usual buzzwords, salad and bingo that I've got knocked around that I just kind of mark off. If you were coming to this market right now, what would you do to change this problem that we have with solution stack?
Well, I mean, I'll give you a customer view on it. Solve a whole problem, not a feature gap. But stop launching point solutions that fix 5% of a 100% problem, which is a terrible phrase, but it's just what I mean. Look, security leaders, we don't have the appetite or budget for another tool that does one thing slightly better than the rest. How do we do it better? Give me something really, truly different. And if your product doesn't significantly replace something or meaningfully reduce operational load, to Oliver's point, consolidate a few things, then it's just more noise. Build for outcome, not for incremental feature wars. And we already mentioned this, design for open, not lock-in. Customers are sick of black box ecosystems. I'm sick of them. If your product doesn't integrate openly and play well across diverse environments, you're already behind. API first from day one, please, and prioritize clean, standardized data sharing. We want interoperability. We don't want hostages. And that's what we feel we are sometimes. There's a few others, but I guess the service mindset kind of wins for me if I'm making purchasing decisions. So if you're coming to market, remember, the product is only half the game. Security teams, GRC, compliance teams, they're drowning. Support, deployment, tuning, and post-sale success, they really make or break from my organizations and ones that I talk to. So be the vendor that doesn't just sell the product, be the one that really helps operationalize it. And I really only understood this at my last role at a SIM vendor where I actually managed pre and post sales. And I just didn't understand until that role just how important that operationalization piece is in the vendor story. So look, and my closing comment on that part of the podcast is, if you're just here to sell a tool, you're already obsolete. If you're here to solve a problem and remove complexity, then welcome to the future.
Completely agree. Most of the companies I work with in the moment are basically looking at this more open system where you're almost putting a SIM together out of different modules. So you've got a telemetry pipeline, you've got a detection engineering add-on, you put it on to ClickHouse and off you go. People are building a SIM within 6 months that way. And it's like a lake SIM, I would say, And why is this good for a new vendor? Because you're open by default. Their data is in Snowflake, their data is on AWS. That's not your problem. And you're not locking them in. So I think if you that's a future you want to build, go for it, because at that point data is a commodity. All of the stuff that these large vendors charge for, you can basically push onto like a utility, like a cloud provider or a backend provider, and you can focus on what's really difficult, which is making sense of the security data. And the second thing is own something end to end, like Richard said. There are certain add-on tools within security which, like if you think of SOAR, UEBA, they were never meant to be standalone markets. Design your solution to add that kind of stuff, everything that makes sense to begin with. That sprawl is really because people are trying to extend what they already have. If you take a very strategic approach to this, you can actually own a part of the SOC just by getting the synergies, and the sum will be greater than the parts. Because cost savings is one reason to go to a consolidated provider. That shouldn't be the only reason. Ultimately, this stuff has to work. And my favorite example of this is repurposing tools. You've got a CIO, he says, hey, observability pipelines. Security can use them. They can use them if they hire a data engineering team. And 3 years later, you've got a data engineering team attached to your SOC, and you're thinking, why? And that's because they were trying to consolidate, and we looked at price, but not at capabilities. These capabilities still have to meet your requirements. They still have to do the job. And I think that's down to the vendors to have better synergies that they provide out of the box there.
I couldn't agree more, actually, with both sets of comments there. I mean, absolutely. If you're going to build a product, fix a problem that people have. Don't look to fix one tiny little aspect of something. Try to fix the whole thing. Look at endpoint security, good example. Back in the day, it was antivirus. That's all it did. Checked for malicious code, done. Scanned on a regular basis with heuristics later on down the line. Now endpoint security is FIM, it's AV, it's, IDS, IPS sensors on it. It'll be content checkers, and you can even do monitoring, so staff monitoring on some of them. And there's a whole plethora of other tools. Consolidation of a lot of different tools that you had to buy back in the day into one quite neat product. Endpoint security is very mature. But I think there's a lot of the immature parts of the market where we're still grubbing around trying desperately to figure out the use cases, as well as the cost. We're seeing costs dramatically rise. Partially it's because of inflation and stuff that we've been going through economically recently. And there's a lot of pushback from customers now. I'm seeing it as well when, their vendor renewals come up and you go in, you say, this is what your new price is. They're like, oh, I don't want to pay that price. It's like, well, that's the price it is now because there's been problems in the market. Okay, there's some that come in with massive amounts of greed, like that particular company I was talking about before, because they know their customers are tied in. And I think this is, again, something that you both said, and that's really, really important, making sure that, you have a product that plays nicely with other products and doesn't disable them, doesn't force them to buy more products from you. Because one of the things that I had when I was sort of running security for various different people is I used to hate buying a product thinking it was going to fix what I thought it was going to fix, only to find there was an additional contract or additional module that I needed to buy on top of it. And then I found that I needed to buy another module. Oh, wow, fantastic. How many modules have you got? Oh, we got 20. How much is each of these? Oh, a couple of $100,000 each. Well, you didn't tell me this beforehand. You were selling me a GRC tool that would do my compliance. And now I've got to buy 15 different modules to gain the operational thing that I was seeing in the POC, because you enabled all the modules then. And now, of course, you're telling me that it's not there. Anyway, that's my bugbear. Anyway, fantastic. Any last comments then on this one? Any last advice for maybe the CISO in this equation?
Yeah, I'll start that one. So I guess what we're really talking about here goes beyond platforms, beyond AI, beyond consolidation even itself. I guess what CISOs want is to finally break free from this endless cycle of unmanaged complexity and reclaim a level of clarity and control and confidence in how we defend our business operations, because that's what matters most. And, adding new capabilities, it isn't the enemy. Innovation does drive us forward. We know that. But if every new tool and every new dashboard and every new integration adds more friction than it removes, and more noise than the insights we need from it, then we have to stop and ask, are we actually really making progress? Are we just making it harder to see what's going on in front of us? So, I think the challenge to all the CISOs, I would say, listen to this is, whether you're building products or you're selling solutions yourself, defending your own organization, make this the moment where you kind of stop and say, stop asking, what else can we add? And start asking, what should we optimize? Because real outcomes isn't just about piling on, as I've said. It's about clearing the way for better decisions, faster action, stronger outcomes. And I said, if we get this right, we won't just be managing the chaos, because I think that's where we are at the moment. We'll finally be kind of leading the business into this kind of future we really need to be in. So there's my words of wisdom for CISOs.
Lovely. I what I'd add is, look, right now, there's no stability. The next 2 to 3 years, there's going to be a constant change. There are going to be technologies which turn out to be dead ends. There's going to be, if I look at the world of AI, LangChain, there's a lot of people complaining. I don't know if you know about it. It's like this library to put together agents. People are complaining that it's inconsistent, keeps changing. Cursor, from one day to the next, AI, integrated development environment, behaves completely different. And these are indicators that right now, you cannot necessarily take things for granted. And I would say plan for that. Instead of having a SIM strategy, have a security data operations strategy. Start looking at this as a bigger topic. Don't assume these are technology issues anymore. You take technology as one part of it and separate it out. I think it's going to help you, and build something which is future ready. Don't try to buy into anything too much, because the reality is that you might have to change in 2 years when this all stabilizes a little bit. So stay agile, stay on your feet. And that means sometimes not changing too much. If you don't have to change something right now, think carefully about it. Most AI projects have failed, right? The vast majority across, whether with vendors, whether from end users, have failed. If you don't need to add it, don't. Change is a expensive, costly risk at this point, unless you really need to.
Fantastic. My final words of wisdom to all of you out there, not that they're particularly wise, as I keep getting told by my partner, is very much, don't tie yourself in for 5-year deals with any product. Okay, it's moving too fast. Technology is changing. Review your defense in depth and your stack when it comes to your solutions at least yearly, like you would do anything. Don't get caught up into 3-year deals. Now, I run a consultancy, and every now and then we sell 3-year deals. So I'm probably doing myself a disfavor here, but at the end of the day, we don't know what it's going to be like in 2, 3 years, 4 years down the line. Don't tie yourself into a product that may, as Oliver said, be a dead end piece of technology in 2 years' time just for a 5% saving or a 10% saving. It's just not worth it. If it's a good technology, it will stand for itself. And then after your year, you just renew it for a year. And then you just renew it the next year until eventually you may obviously need to replace that with something a bit more current. Too many people get stuck in with long-term contracts in the security technological space that they wind up regretting. Sometimes it's fine. Sometimes it's not fine. Sometimes they go under a year in, and we are in a very volatile space at the moment, in a very volatile economy, at least here in Europe. I know in the States it's up and down a little bit with what's going on over there. But, just don't tie yourself in, and do regular reviews, preferably before, the subscriptions or, the license comes up, and try to do it all at the same time, because it's much easier than trying to plan it piecemeal all the way through the year. Anyway, that's just what I think. Right. Thank you, Oliver. Thank you, Richard. We've reached the end of our time once again. To all of you out there, thank you ever so much. We are smashing it with record numbers of subscribers recently. By the time this comes out, we might have even hit I think we would have hit the 12,000 active subscribers on YouTube. So thank you to all of you out there who subscribe and regularly watch. You're absolutely fantastic. Keep sending me DMs if you want additional content, or you want me, Oliver and Richard, to hit another, one of our futurist kind of outlooks on what's coming down the line, or changes in the markets or the environments. we're always happy to sit down and debate and occasionally argue. And thank you for listening or even watching the latest edition of Razorwire. It's always good to get feedback. Please feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to us via LinkedIn or through our website, www.razorthorn.com. If you feel that there's something that we should cover maybe a little bit more in depth, a new topic, or something of interest to you or the community at large, we'll even do interviews. If you've got any recommendations or you want us to interview people, we'll reach out to those individuals and see if we can get them on camera so we can ask them the important questions about InfoSec. So it'd be great to see what your feedback is. In addition, I do have a book recently come out, the Cyber Sentinels Handbook, a primer for information security professionals. Now, this book is very much geared up towards professionals at all levels of their career, be they starters, be they newcomers, be they people who've been in it for a little while and maybe looking for a little bit more direction, albeit the older ones looking to maybe reground themselves in some of the more important aspects of the trade that maybe they've forgotten over time. I've had lots of good feedback from a lot of different readers of a lot of different levels, so please feel free to get yourselves a copy. We've got the e-copy, we've also got the paperback copy, and if you don't want to spend any money, you can go on Kindle Unlimited and read the book for free there as well. So thank you ever so much again. Look after yourselves, and we'll be seeing you again soon.